zeitgeist and this Reish Galuta's interests shared by the elite classes of Persian society. So one aspect of Roman culture which was widely known even in Babylonia and shocking at the same time was the gladiatorial spectacle. And it's possible that public vivisection as described by Galen and others was known as well. This does not mean that the Reish Galuta either organized or participated in such events. In the same way that it's highly unlikely that the servants of Rabbi Ishmael or Cleopatra's retainers were dissecting prostitutes and maidservants, but where stories were known in Babylonia in the Talmud. So the mere suggestion that the Reish Galuta's own staff might be performing vivisection is a juicy, scandalous accusation, since the practice cannot be considered illegal, in that it intends to further medical knowledge, but at the same time it reflects bad taste. The original fictitious scenario may have been a public vivisection in which Rav Sheshet's servant stole one of the limbs of a live animal being dissected, in which case it had to be replaced immediately by the limb of another animal. Remember, this is all fictitious, huh? But that doesn't matter. So there's one other additional bit of information to support my speculative view of this story, namely the whiteness and the blackness which Rav Sheshet tastes in the meat. Remember, he's blind. He cannot see these colors, but he concludes that the animal is ill. Now, one thing is clear, that the translations have it wrong, since whiteness never refers to leprosy, nor is there any reference to the text, in this text, to skin disease. The usual translation is that a white spot on a black hide, or a black spot on a white hide, indicate a defect in the animal. But the word for hide or skin is never here. It's not in the text. So what could this be referring to? We have black and white Ukrainian and other recipes in the Talmud, for instance. But we get rather detailed information from Galen about dissections of live animals and what problems he was demonstrating, such as identifying the vocal cords with sounds produced by the animal and the movements of the limbs if the blood supply is cut off, or examining arteries and veins. These are typical kind of demonstrative problems of vivisections. All of this is pretty technical, but let's surmise. What would someone think about? What would someone imagine about a vivisection if he'd never seen one? What would a doctor likely to be searching for in the vivisection in the lives of a layman? So one possibility is that vivisection would be a good way to discover evidence for the well-known four humors, namely blood, yellow bile, black bile, phlegm, usually associated with the colors red, yellow, black, and white. The Greek use of bloodletting was becoming known in Babylonia and gets mentioned fairly frequently in the Talmud, although bloodletting was not practiced in Babylonia as far as we know. Basic idea is that these four humors occur in balance in a healthy body and imbalance in an unhealthy one, and bloodletting restores the balance. So from a layman's point of view, one might well dissect an animal to detect the surplus of bodily fluid or a humor, such as in a limb. Rav Sheshet indeed claims to have discovered whiteness, a symptom of disease in the animal, which the good doctors in the exilarch's employ had missed. They defend themselves by saying, no, they produce no evidence of whiteness on that day. The medical rule, which Rav Sheshet then cites from his colleague Rav Chisda, is that whiteness, phlegm, and blackness, which is bile, should not be out of balance. And if so, this indicates disease. An observation which can be traced back to Greek medicine. The unknown author of the Greek medical text, Anonymous Londinensis, from the 2nd century CE, attributes one cause of disease to the wrong mixture of bile and phlegm in the body, black humor and white humor. A paradigm which is known from the Hippocratic Corpus, widely attested. these humors were characterized in medical literature as black and white movies. So in the end, the Exilarch's minions are bested at their own game. Rav Sheshet has out-diagnosed them in a good competitive style by discovering the disease of the animal which the dissection was intended to discover, but which the doctors themselves had missed. Galen would have approved. So what does this tell us at all about Talmudic medicine? Doesn't tell us anything, maybe not. But then again, it draws attention to how little we know of the context of such passages in the Talmud, and how little we know of daily life, material, culture, differences between social classes within the Jewish community of Babylonia. But I think one thing is clear. The story itself is a fantasy, which is no longer which was no longer understood by compilers of the Talmud, who inherited these accounts centuries earlier and couldn't understand what the fuss was all about. The background or cultural biases which these stories reflected. It's relatively easy to imagine how the subject of vivisection might have aroused passions in the late Roman period, which was completely forgotten several centuries later. And this is how a story based on Eva min Achai as vivisection was recast as a banal story about kosher kitchens and dining, as it was understood by the later commentators. It is only by speculating that we may have a chance at recovering the real drama behind these Talmudic fictions. And one more note, if we depend upon Julius Preuss for a survey of this material, we will miss quite a lot.